The harmonica was supposed to be a poor man's instrument, 30 cents at the corner store. Nothing special. But when Marion Walter Jacobs got his hands on one, he turned it into something that would shake the foundations of American music. They called him Little Walter, and by the time he was done, he'd revolutionized the blues, influenced the Rolling Stones, and created sounds nobody had ever heard before. But here's where things get dark. At just 37 years old, he was found dead in his girlfriend's apartment, and to this day, nobody can agree on what really happened that night. Picture this. Chicago, 1952. A young man walks into a recording studio, picks up a harmonica, and does something nobody's ever done before. He cups it against a microphone, runs it through a guitar amplifier, and suddenly that tiny instrument sounds like a saxophone crossed with thunder. The song was called Juke, and within a week, it hit #1 on the Billboard R&B charts. It stayed there for 8 weeks straight. This wasn't just success. This was the birth of a completely new sound. And the man behind it, he was only 22 years old, but he'd already lived more life than most people see in decades. See, Little Walter's story starts in chaos. Born in Marksville, Louisiana, on May 1st, 1930, he came into this world without a birth certificate, and his parents split before he even arrived. His mother was young, unmarried, and in those days, that was enough to make you an outcast. Her parents forced her to give him up, though she spent years searching for him afterward. His father, he took the baby and disappeared, dropping him off with relatives on a farm in Alexandria. By the time Walter turned 8, he discovered the harmonica, or harp as they called it on the streets. He couldn't afford a saxophone, which is what he really wanted. But that cheap harmonica, he played it until it broke, then he'd fix it and play it some more. That's how he learned the instrument inside and out. But then everything went sideways. His father shot and killed his sister's boyfriend and went to prison. His uncle, who was raising him, shot and killed a white man who'd shot his dog. Prison again. By age 12, Walter had seen enough. He was already dating older women, getting into trouble, and when the family he was staying with in New Orleans started abusing him, he made a decision that would change everything. He quit school, jumped on a freight train like a hobo, and headed north to Chicago. 12 years old, alone, chasing a dream he could barely articulate. Now, if you're enjoying these untold stories from music history, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started with the chaos. The journey to Chicago wasn't straight. He stopped in Helena, Arkansas, where he heard the records of John Lee "Sonny Boy" Williamson playing from jukeboxes. That sound captivated him. He met Rice Miller, who was going around calling himself Sonny Boy Williamson to capitalize on the real one's fame, and later hooked up with Honey Boy Edwards. These connections would matter, but nothing would matter as much as what happened when he finally reached Chicago around 1945. Maxwell Street was where the magic happened. Musicians lined the sidewalks playing for tips, and young Walter, now calling himself Little Walter, was right there with them. He got a job doing laundry to survive, but the real money came from playing that harmonica on street corners. At 16, he recorded his first demo on a tiny label, going by Little Walter J. But the real breakthrough came when he was 17 and met a man who would change his life, Muddy Waters. Muddy was already making waves in Chicago, twice Walter's age, and building something special. When guitarist Jimmy Rogers brought Little Walter to audition, Muddy heard something different. This wasn't just another harmonica player. This kid had something revolutionary brewing inside him. They formed a band called the Headhunters, and together they started creating what would become known as the Chicago blues sound. But Walter had a problem. When the full band played, you could barely hear his harmonica over the guitars and drums. So he did something nobody had done before. He grabbed a microphone, cupped his harmonica against it, and ran it through a guitar amplifier. The sound was distorted at first, weird even, but when he mastered the breathing technique, it was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. Leonard Chess, who ran Chess Records with his brother Phil, didn't know what to do with Walter's instrumental track at first. A harmonica song with no vocals? Who'd buy that? But then something happened that changed his mind. He played the track in the studio with the windows open, and women on the street started dancing. That's when he knew. He renamed the song Juke, created a new subsidiary label called Checker Records just for Walter, and released it in 1952. What happened next was unprecedented. It became the biggest hit in Chess Records history, bigger than anything Muddy Waters had done, bigger than Chuck Berry would do, bigger than Etta James. Little Walter had the hottest record on the label. The success transformed him overnight. Suddenly, harmonicas that cost 30 cents were selling for $500. Walter was touring the world, riding around with a trunk full of cash, and had women fighting over him in every city. They say he'd have 5 or 6 women wanting to go home with him every night, and if they couldn't, they'd literally tear the club apart. Fans who couldn't get inside packed venues would sometimes shoot the place up, and somehow Walter would be the one arrested for it. The money was flowing so heavy that Chess Records got its nickname Cadillac Records because all the artists were driving Cadillacs. Walter would wreck one every 6 months, and Leonard Chess would just buy him another one. And speaking of crazy stories, make sure you like this video if you want more deep dives into music's wildest untold histories. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Success didn't mellow little Walter. It amplified everything about him, including his temper. He'd always been hot-headed, speaking French when he got angry because of his Creole heritage, but now he had money, fame, and guns. Both he and Muddy Waters carried weapons. Muddy kept 2 guns, and Walter would hide his in his amplifier during shows. The combination of fame, cash, and that explosive personality created a perfect storm. The relationships with women became increasingly violent and chaotic. Walter had a thing for older women, sometimes 20 years his senior, and these affairs rarely ended well. According to Honey Boy Edwards, Walter once sliced a man's mouth with a knife when the guy confronted him about seeing his girl. One woman hit Walter with a wine bottle across the face. If you look at his photos from this period, you can see the scars accumulating. Another woman shot him in the leg, leaving him with a permanent limp. This destroyed him psychologically because before that, people used to imitate his cool walk. Now he was dragging his leg, and when he got drunk, he could barely move. Then there was the incident that sounds too crazy to be true, but multiple sources confirmed it. When Leonard Chess refused to buy him yet another Cadillac after he'd wrecked the previous one, Walter drove his current car straight through the wall into Chess's office and demanded a new one. The wildest part? Chess gave it to him. By 1955, Walter had left Muddy's band to go solo, though they'd eventually reconcile. His song, My Babe, hit #1 for 5 weeks, knocking Ray Charles's I Got a Woman off the top spot. Willie Dixon, who wrote many of Chess's hits, said the song was perfect for Walter because everyone knew he was a ladies' man who couldn't stop bragging about his women. More hits followed. You're So Fine, Blues with a Feeling, Sad Hours, Mean Old World, all collected on his 1958 album, The Best of Little Walter. But as the 1950s turned into the 1960s, everything started falling apart. Rock and roll was taking over, and the blues were becoming yesterday's news. Artists like Frankie Lyman, Little Richard, and Walter's own label mate Chuck Berry were the new kings. Walter's drinking, which had started as RC Cola and Pepsi when he first joined Muddy, had turned into moonshine, gin, and eventually heroin. The violence escalated too. Chicago cops beat him so badly once that doctors said his skull was permanently damaged and told him one more beating like that would kill him. Did that stop the fights? Not even close. There were so many incidents it's hard to keep track. Some guys blocked the street with their cars, and when Walter got out with a tire iron to make them move, they took it from him and nearly beat him to death with it. Another time, he got robbed and beaten so badly that doctors warned him not to perform that night because playing the harmonica could cause more damage to his head. He went on stage anyway. He was making extra money pimping women on Chicago's streets, and there were whispers that a teenage Tina Turner, then still Anna Mae, had been involved with him when she first arrived in the city. The European tours in 1964 and 1967 should have been career revivals. Blues might have been fading in America, but Europeans still loved it. The Rolling Stones, who took their name from Muddy's song, brought Walter overseas. But even there, the demons followed him. After drinking a bottle of gin straight down before a show, he got into an altercation with a young Rod Stewart and tried to stab him with a knife. Walter would pass out on stage, fall down repeatedly, and his once revolutionary harmonica playing became sloppy and off-key. He told people he hated London because they didn't appreciate him, but the truth was darker. His lungs were failing from years of abuse, making it harder to play the instrument that defined him. Now, if you're still watching at this point, you're probably as hooked on these stories as I am. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we drop these deep dives into music's untold stories. By early 1968, Walter looked like a man in his 50s, though he was only 37. The drugs, alcohol, and countless beatings had aged him beyond recognition. Then came February 15th, 1968. He was taking a break from performing at a South Side Chicago club when something happened that would become one of blues music's most debated mysteries. Here's where the story splinters into multiple versions, and nobody can agree on what really happened. According to the official report, Walter got into a fight during a dice game and was hit in the head with an iron pipe. He went home to his girlfriend's apartment with a headache and never woke up. The death certificate listed coronary thrombosis, a blood clot in the heart, aggravated by old injuries. But that's just the official version. Walter's friend Sam Lay tells a different story. He says Walter called him that night, saying he'd fought with his girlfriend's brother over a stolen watch. The brother had punched Walter in the head, and Walter had stabbed him with a knife in return. Walter wanted Sam to bring his gun for revenge, but Sam said he'd come the next day. By morning, Walter was dead. Big Guitar Red, who claimed to be there that night, said it started when Walter mocked another harmonica player. They fought, and the guy hit Walter in the head with his own harmonica. Junior Wells, another harmonica legend and Walter's close friend, insisted it was about dice. Walter had won, the other guy wanted his money back, and when Walter refused, the man pulled out a hammer and hit him with it. The blow didn't look that bad, Wells said, didn't even knock Walter down. Nobody thought it would kill him. But Honeyboy Edwards, who'd known Walter since he was 13, tells perhaps the darkest version. He says Walter was involved with a woman on welfare who had 5 or 6 kids. Walter would show up when her checks came in, taking her money while high on cocaine and alcohol. One night her husband showed up and they fought. The husband hit Walter with a blackjack, and that was it. The funeral was as chaotic as Walter's life. His sister attacked Muddy Waters, scratching his face deeply, screaming that he'd let Walter die. Leonard Chess paid for the funeral, but the family had to sue to get Walter's royalties. People stole everything, his jewelry, his amplifiers, even his Cadillac. When the family saw his body, the funeral home had made him up so wrong, his light Creole skin painted dark black with some kind of wax, that they had to demand he be redone and moved to another funeral home. The grave went unmarked for over 20 years until 1991, when loyal fans finally put up a tombstone. But even death couldn't end the drama. A woman named Marion Diaz-Riaco claimed to be Walter's daughter and won his estate in court, worth millions in royalties. Walter's family insists she's not his daughter, pointing out that Walter himself said he was sterile from a venereal disease he'd contracted as a teenager. They wanted to exhume his body for DNA testing, but the court sided with Riaco. The battle continues to this day. But here's what can't be disputed. Little Walter changed music forever. That innovative, amplified harmonica sound he created, it influenced everyone from the Beatles to Led Zeppelin to Bob Dylan. The Rolling Stones built their entire early career on covers of Chess Records songs, including Walter's. Elvis Presley borrowed heavily from his style. Juke was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame and ranked as one of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. The 2008 movie Cadillac Records brought his story to a new generation, with Columbus Short's portrayal earning critical acclaim even if it didn't capture all the darkness of Walter's real life. Walter died exactly like one of his idols. The original Sonny Boy Williamson had also been killed over a dice game at just 34 years old. His brother had died from a head injury after being hit by a car at 14. Head trauma seemed to run in the family like a curse. In his final years, multiple doctors had warned Walter that his skull couldn't take another beating, that his brain was permanently damaged, that one more incident would kill him. They were right. Was it the dice game, the jealous husband, the stolen watch, the harmonica fight? Maybe it was all of them. A lifetime of beatings finally catching up on one February night in Chicago. The police found no evidence of foul play, no external injuries that night. Just a 37-year-old genius who'd lived like he was immortal until he wasn't. Little Walter created a sound that transformed American music, but he couldn't transform himself. He remained that 12-year-old runaway, fighting everyone and everything, even when he had the world in his hands. He revolutionized the harmonica, influenced generations of musicians, and died young and violent, leaving behind a mystery that may never be solved. They say Muddy Waters wasn't surprised when he heard Walter was dead. Little Walter was dead 10 years before he died, Muddy said. Maybe he was right. Maybe the music was the only thing keeping him alive all along. The harmonica that cost 30 cents. The boy who ran away at 12. The genius who changed music forever. The man who died at 37 with more stories than most people accumulate in a lifetime. That was Little Walter, brilliant, violent, innovative, self-destructive, and ultimately unforgettable. His music lives on, sampled and covered and celebrated, while the truth about his final night remains buried with him in that Chicago cemetery, marked by a stone his fans had to buy because everyone else had already taken everything they could from Little Walter, even in death. If you made it this far into Little Walter's wild story, you're clearly into the real, unfiltered history of music. Drop a comment below. What shocked you most about his life? And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more deep dives into the untold stories behind the music. Next time, we're covering another legend whose life was just as explosive as their music. Until then, keep digging deeper.